Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. So we've covered quite a bit of ground so far this morning. We've talked about building community and healing fragmentation through the arts. We've talked about dispelling myths about disability through the arts. And we've talked about Star Trek, a surprising amount of Star Trek. I know, it's a good morning. I'm good with that. So there's been lots to talk about so far, but we've got a lot more ground to cover this afternoon. But a quick reminder, if you're joining us for the first time today, we want to let you know that each speaker will go to the networking room after their talk. It's a chance for you to delve a little more deeply into some of these issues with them. So if there's something you want to follow up with the speaker about, just head next door after they wrap up. Next, how do you transform community for the better? Our next speaker believes artists can be the driving force for transformation. For the last 5 years, she has served as the Vice President of Programs at the Hudson Weber Foundation. Her work is focused on building a grant-making program and cultivating grantee relationships to revitalize greater downtown Detroit. She now joins the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation as the Program Director based in Detroit. Please welcome Katy Locker.
Good morning. I'm honored to be here at SphinxCon and to participate with such an impressive set of speakers. I feel a little out of place because my work tends to focus on the visual expression of art and place rather than the performing arts. But in the end, regardless of the format, it is our art that brings vibrancy and diversity to our lives, and I believe the same principles apply across mediums. I'm going to spend my brief time with you talking about why creative placemaking is at the heart of Knight Foundation's community investments. But first, for those of you who don't know us, a couple words about Knight Foundation. Knight Foundation is a national foundation with deep local roots. While headquartered in Miami and leading with a national lens, we serve 26 communities where John and Jim Knight operated newspapers. I would imagine that most of you in the room know us best for the Knight Arts Challenge that has been run in Miami, Philadelphia, started in Detroit last year. We're just about to launch year 2 here in Detroit, and has been launched in St. Paul for the first time this year. But we also contribute to journalism and media innovation, and we invest directly in the Knight communities. In 8 communities, including Detroit, where I serve, we embed local program directors to ensure we understand and best serve the community. And our mission is to serve an informed and engaged community. The Knight brothers believed that informed and engaged communities were at the heart of a robust democracy. So how does that get us to the arts and creative placemaking? All of us in this room know that art can add value to communities in 100 different ways. Creative placemaking, however, supports arts with a very specific intent: to drive vibrancy and diversity in communities, and to create places where people exchange ideas. And I think we all have experienced that, where we've been standing somewhere where we've just seen something amazing in the arts, whether it's a performance, whether it's a mural that is in front of us, and it causes us to talk to our neighbor in a way that we wouldn't before, and inspires us to have new conversations. So creative placemaking makes a true difference to the success of communities. I'm going to take us through 8 principles of creative placemaking, and these are an abridged version of work completed by Art Place America when it was led by Carol Coletta. Carol now leads Knight Foundation's community investments and maintains the lens she built over a decade of work dedicated to arts and cities. But first, I want to mention my own lens. My heart is with Detroit, so my lens is always Detroit. And I think Detroit can show the world what real creative placemaking looks like, how our diverse and authentic community can build a place that is uniquely ours. My team has an extraordinary set of pictures and images that come from around the country and around the world to exemplify creative placemaking. Knight Foundation has this lens that is inclusive of the whole world. But I can't really talk about that as well as I can talk about Detroit. So I threw out all the national pictures, and I captured moments that have connected with my soul here in Detroit. And I wish I had slightly better pictures of some of the amazing artistic places in Detroit, but we're going to work with what I had. And the very last picture is my favorite and particularly special to me today. And I want to comment, just before I go firmly into the principles, that in reflecting on this conversation I knew I was going to have with you, I reflected that the art is not at the front of the places that I talk about. But I think where the art lies and where the creativity lies is what informs the development of place, and it creates some distinctiveness and vibrancy. So again, feel a little out of place at the arts conference, but I know that it's the artistic mind that forms these places. So the starting point. Successful creative placemaking leverages local assets, increasing the value in a community while nurturing an enduring sense of place. We all know what inauthentic places look and feel like. We've felt them in manufactured communities and in every strip mall in America. We feel them when we go into hotel conference centers that could be anywhere in America. A place that expresses distinctiveness and resists commodification and sameness is more likely to have long-term appeal. It's certainly where my passion for Detroit's places begins. An outdoor concert is always a favorite. And for those of us that actually live here in the Midwest, outdoor concerts are a thing of our dreams right now. But here, last summer, this is actually my picture, the Detroit Institute of Arts hosted concerts on the lawn. It was an extraordinary backdrop to bring people together for a different use of an iconic Detroit site. Successful creative placemaking supports economic diversity in the community, providing multiple points of entry and interaction for people of all incomes. As its value increases, a place that is intentionally inclusive and connected is more likely to spur economic opportunity and allow people to succeed where they are. I'm a resident of Lafayette Park, which is just north of the Detroit riverfront. This is, if you haven't gone outside because of the cold, this is right outside the Renaissance Center here. And I can walk down to the riverfront from my home. I find the riverfront magical because it truly is a safe and vibrant place for everyone. As we invest in our public places as places that inspire and engage, if we design them well to be open and welcoming public places, we are investing in all of our residents. I take real joy from my moments on the riverfront, where I see the great diversity of users from all over the city and often from all over the world because of so many of our convention facilities being located here, and their sense that the space belongs to them just as much as it belongs to anyone else. And it's a unique public space that really can offer that environment. Successful creative placemaking creates interesting places that capitalize on distinctiveness. This is my one slide that's not from Detroit. It's a few hours down the road in Cincinnati. They held Luminosity last year and attracted 35,000 people over 2 nights to listen to the Cincinnati Symphony, while a digital light show was projected on the music hall and people enjoyed the redeveloped Washington Park. How does this experience change a visitor's perception of the neighborhood? And who might they interact with while sitting on that lawn, open to all, in the heart of a previously disinvested neighborhood? The creative vision to see this magnificent architecture as part of the artistic experience for the orchestra impacted 35,000 people's impressions of the city of Cincinnati last summer, and they'll bring it back again this August. Successful creative placemaking creates a place where people want to go and linger. When people linger, it likely leads to additional investments. Here in Detroit's cultural corridor, our neighborhood intermediary, Midtown Detroit Inc., has figured this out and hosts some major events to invite lingering and seeing the place from a pedestrian viewpoint. This is an image from D-Electricity held in the fall of 2012, lining the Woodward Avenue in the heart of our cultural corridor. It returns to the streets of Detroit this fall, and a lot of us are very excited to see it again. An urban greenway has been built through this area with bike and walking amenities, but the key to reintroducing the Motor City to the idea that they can interact with their space differently is to create events like D-Electricity and like our annual Noel night held in December to reintroduce and engage people who have otherwise not considered the streets inviting. Successful creative placemaking fosters connections among diverse users, which helps create safer, more open places. This less than inspiring photograph does not do justice to the work that's been done in Detroit's Livernois corridor to re-invite people to that commercial block. Art installations, community storefronts, pop-up and permanent retail, and events have created space for fun and for conversations along a corridor with much hope but little activity until this effort started. It also exemplifies the next principle, that creative placemaking is always presenting itself to the public and encouraging pedestrian activity. Mixing it up makes it more likely that people will stumble onto the fun, the people, the ideas, and the opportunities. A place that is consistently interesting and presents an active presence to the street promotes more pedestrian activity and creates the public perception that the place is safer and more animated. More pedestrians means more prospective customers on the street to support more small business. In our work here in Detroit, this perception of safety issue and the idea that putting more people on the streets not only makes us safer, but makes us perceive safety, has been a critical moment for us in a city that so often is thought of as unsafe, where many really of our main corridors are perfectly safe. This drab park is where a building was demolished and reimagined for de-electricity last year. There have never been so many pedestrians using that site, and the event ignited the imagination about what's possible on the site. Placemaking creates a place where business wants to be, and for those of us that are interested in the economic development of our cities, it's a core component of our work. As a place becomes more active and businesses are created and grow, people have more reasons to be there. We're witnessing this business and artistic growth around Detroit's longstanding Eastern Market District. Again, my picture doesn't do it justice, but the district presents its own distinct character, brought further to life by artistic venues, murals, and on our market days, performances making the space feel alive for the vast quantity of visitors that come from all over our region and from all walks of life to come to the market on a Saturday. Finally, successful creative placemaking convinces people that a place can have a different and a better future. The artist Theaster Gates has said, if you create space where creative people can do the things that they do very, very well, and create an environment where they feel ownership of that space, the feeling of ownership will lead to better stewardship. This is my second to last picture, and probably my second favorite. This picture of downtown's Campus Martius has been widely shared as Detroit works its way out of dark times. The vitality of the space that evening as we began the holiday season makes those of us who have seen non-vital times in the city of Detroit feel like a much better future is possible. Which leads me to my last slide that relates to Detroit's future. So today is my godson's 4th birthday. I won't be with you later today because I'll be at his pizza party. He lives just up the street in a neighboring building to me in Lafayette Park, and he's a true city kid. He was born here and he's been raised here, and if you go into someone's backyard, he thinks he's going to the park. And when I was collecting photos for this presentation, I sent out some notes to some partners to say, can you send me some pictures of people enjoying our great places? And so one of those notes went to the Detroit Creative Corridor Center, who does not know who my godson is, and they sent me this picture. That was the first picture that came up. That's Danny, who turns 4 today. And I believe he deserves spaces that are vital, diverse, and inspiring. And I know Detroit is a place that will grow his creativity and expose him to different cultures and ideas. And he gets to have fun. Thank you.
Our next speaker believes if you want diversity on the stage, that process starts long before auditions and casting. Please welcome the co-founder of the Center for Women of Color in the Arts, Kaisha Johnson.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Wow, it feels like, my mom would be proud right now. Thanks, Mom. All the investment and hard work you put into this. So first of all, let me please start out by saying thank you to Aaron Dworkin and the Sphinx organization. for this incredible invitation. It's like my destiny has been manifested on this stage today, because as a young violinist studying classical music in my hometown of Houston, Texas, I often felt largely isolated. Even though seemingly on the outside, I was part of a really robust musical community. I played in 2 symphony orchestras, and I was exposed very early on to a great spectrum of classical music. But when I started to learn more about the field as a young adult and consider my professional options, well, I can say my ever-present feelings of inadequacy really cemented my outlook on classical music as a profession. And although I really loved playing music, it was that feeling that ultimately shifted my career course. And now I'm standing in front of you as an administrator as opposed to an artist. Now, that's not to say I never look back, I never had any regrets, but I really never imagined in my lifetime that there'd be such incredible strides being made in diversifying the classical music field. So for that, I again say thank you to the Sphinx organization. So before I start, I must also give thanks to the elders and those mentors, whether they realize that they have been mentoring me or not, that have guided us along the way. You know, this discourse that we're having of diversity in the arts and cultural democracy and equity, it's not a new one. And this path of pursuing and staying committed to the nonprofit arts field isn't an easy one, but I truly believe in destiny, and it's a path that was written in the stars. So I actually come here today wearing 2 hats. One as the co-founder and the founding director of Women of Color in the Arts, and the other as the director of touring artists at the Center for Traditional Music and Dance, both organizations which are based in New York City. So Women of Color in the Arts, or as we affectionately call it, WOCA, was founded on the premise that our field should be reflective of our world. And not seeing enough people that looked like me doing the work that I did in the presenting field was more than disheartening. And certainly this was the driving force of the impetus behind the founding of the organization. So WOCA's mission is dedicated to promoting diversity in the performing arts field by creating professional opportunities for women of color. We believe that by working to diversify the pipeline of arts administrators, we aim to cultivate a field as varied in voice and perspectives as the communities that we serve. So this is what constitutes diversity for me. A dynamic mix of voice and perspective. And we can only create that mix through people of varying cultural, racial, and religious backgrounds. So I'd like to share WOCA's value statement just as purpose to give context to our work. So number 1, we support an equitable role for women of color in fostering cultural democracy, nationally and internationally. We encourage critical dialogue about the role of the arts in our organizations, communities, this nation, and our world. We believe the power of collective intention and collective action, with a focus on the action, will shift the internal and external conversations regarding diversity in the performing arts field. We believe that the voices, expertise, and experiences of women of color are unique. We believe that increasing the opportunities for women of color to serve in decision-making positions only strengthens the field. So it should be noted that WOCA believes that this concept of cultural democracy comprises a large set of related commitments, those being protecting and promoting cultural diversity, and the right to culture for everyone in our society and around the world, encouraging active participation in community cultural life, enabling people to participate in policy decisions that affect the quality of our cultural lives, and assuring fair and equitable access to cultural resources and support. So, in a nutshell, although seemingly incongruous, my work at the Center for Traditional Music and Dance really informed and ignited much of the work of WOCA. Through my professional travels, I was able to really survey the field and see firsthand the lack of diversity among administrators and people in leadership positions. And it was really becoming increasingly worrisome that seeing middle-aged white men having a conversation about cultural diversity and this importance of representing diverse communities when we weren't sitting at the table. There was no diverse representation at the table. And that really resonated with me, not only as an administrator, but as a supporter of the arts. Where are we going if we can't stop and acknowledge that we are not all along for the ride, right? So my work at CTMD also ignited this idea of consistently infusing my work with culturally democratic practices, which is, again, a decades-long theology. So the basis of the conversation today at its core is about cultural democracy. The issue that I've chosen to tackle, not just for this particular presentation, but for my life's work, is those responsible for programming arts on stages across the country are not reflective of the diversity that appears on stage. And a solution: foster the practice of inclusion, beginning with those sitting at the decision-making table. Now, this is not rocket science. It's not groundbreaking or revolutionary. But you'd be surprised how many in the presenting field never even considered this practice. So getting back to cultural democracy proposes that fair and equitable and proportional attention be given to each cultural community. Yet despite decades of multicultural rhetoric, the greatest share of promotion and funding continues to celebrate a Eurocentric canon of the arts, not reflective of the growing communities in our world, or as identified by the US Census as exponentially increasing in ethnic and racial composition. So due to large population shifts, now more than ever, diversity is more than a catchphrase, it's an edict that states that inclusion must start from the boardroom and continue on to the performance stage. So I didn't really come here today to necessarily have a perfunctory dialogue about the importance of diversity in the arts. Rather, I'm really interested in exploring more conversations that are formulated around the notion that creating a cultural democracy is critical to fostering the practice of inclusion. And paramount to the practice of inclusion is the long-term commitment organizations, institutions must have in ensuring a diverse group of people, of communities are at the discussion table well before any artistic presentation makes it to the stage. So should I repeat that? Because that's really, really important, okay? I'm interested in exploring discussions that are formulated around the notion that creating a cultural democracy is critical to fostering the practice of inclusion. And paramount to the practice of inclusion is the long-term commitment institutions must have in ensuring a diverse group of communities are seated at the table. So cultural democracy suggests that only community insiders would be able to make insightful and thoughtful programmatic recommendations about what we believe to be relevant to their specific cultural communities, and thus help spell success for cultural institutions in building audiences and fostering a true community engagement. That means in order to facilitate a true cultural democracy, those community members that must be seated at the decision-making table. And let's be clear and real, okay? I want to have some real talk today. There are some institutions out there that only care to cater to a specific community that is not reflective of our growing nation. That's their bread and butter, and they found success in that. And I don't find that problematic whatsoever. Let them do what they do best for their communities whom support them. What I do find problematic, however, those organizations that want to create more diverse audiences and be more inclusive in their programming and connect with their communities, but relegate diversity to one culturally specific month of the year, right? So some critical questions for discussion I'd like to put out in the universe are, what are some existing practices or applications that our institutions can look towards as a model for cultivating democratic curatorial practice. How do we access accessibility to the arts when an individual community member is absent from the discussion table? And lastly, how do we engender a shift in the way arts administrators think about long-term community investment? So the Center for Traditional Music and Dance is an interesting case study as a presenting organization because for the last 45 years or so, CTMD has worked to assist New York City's immigrant communities in preserving the vitality of their performing arts traditions and by promoting cross-cultural awareness and understanding by sharing these art forms with the 5 boroughs of New York. And we do this through documentation, artistic presentation, and educational programming. So one particular initiative that we have that was truly developed to help level the playing field is our community cultural initiatives. CTMD's cornerstone program, the Community Cultural Initiative, is a collaborative model designed to cultivate partnerships with individual artists and arts and cultural organizations within immigrant and ethnic communities, and to foster self-sustaining community interest in and financial support for the traditional performing arts. So ultimately, the center's CCIs assist ethnic and immigrant communities in carrying out and realizing independent activities as a presenting organization, which helps in turn to preserve their own cultural heritage and artistic traditions. So CTMB has done extensive work in various New York communities. I can't name all of them, but from the Albanian to the Arab to the Chinese, Dominican, Filipino, Greek, Macedonian, Mexican, Peruvian, Soviet Jewish, Ukrainian, West African, just to name a few. And right now we're currently working on initiatives in the Colombian and the Haitian communities. And actually, artist and advocate Simone Shaheen, who inspired us so much last night, played a really integral role in one of these community initiatives. So a community cultural initiative project typically takes place over a 5-year period and consists of 3 distinct phases. 1, initiation and field research, investigation and documentation of local immigrant artistic traditions, identification of traditional artists and master teachers, assessment of community needs. People don't do the assessment of community needs, resources and opportunities, and establishments of relationships between the center and members of the community. That's usually at minimum a 1-year process. Then the next step is the community collaboration and program development. And this entails program design and implementation with technical assistance from the center, so that's helping teach community members about funding and grant writing, and how to put presentation on stage in collaboration with community members and artists. This usually lasts about 3 years. And then lastly is the culmination phase, which is a transition toward ongoing community-sustained cultural activities over the course of 1 year, which has in so many cases resulted in these communities founding their own nonprofit organizations that realize their own goals through public performance and educational programming. So the CCI model is the center's most effective tool for advancing its mission of cultural equity, the right of every cultural community or cultural group to express and sustain its distinct cultural heritage. And it puts the cultural democratic practices right front and center. Now, I can't say that being democratic in our practices automatically creates this utopian society, because it doesn't. I mean, look at the current state of affairs in our own country. But I will say that real democracy requires a sharing of resources, and access to resources equals power. So the real conversation that we need to be having is around this topic of equity, and how we get people to understand that the relinquishment of power doesn't mean you become an impotent individual. It means that you're working to strengthen the collective, okay? So listen, this is messy work. It's often uncomfortable to have these conversations. It's not for the weak, and it's certainly not for those interested in a quick solve to diversity issues, but the outcomes are irrefutable. Obviously, not all organizations can take the time and this particular approach that the CCI model has made to engendering cultural, equitable, and democratic practices. But if you have the commitment to affect a lasting impact on your organizations and the communities that they serve, you will invite your community members to both the discussion and the decision-making table. You will listen to their ideas and perspectives. You will share your intellectual and your financial capital, your resources, and you will invest in them as they have invested in creating an arts community, which I believe is ultimately tailor-made in showcasing what is right and good in this world. Thank you so much. And I made it in 0 seconds.
Kaisha, if you can hold on 1 second, they'll run away yet.
No!
Well, no. Well, you used an interesting phrase in your talk. You talked about the internal conversation and the external conversation. How do you bridge that gap? And I know that's a big question.
That is a big question. It's a good one. You know, a lot of the internal conversation, I think it comes from a reconciliation of your own personal beliefs and being comfortable enough to see, you know, this is what I'm doing right and this is what I'm doing wrong. Being open enough to take that to outside of your little community. The external conversation, like I said, is not a comfortable one. It's not. So I think making sure that you have it all together, like you know what you're going to be, you know the importance, you know why this work is important before you go out and start spreading it to the masses.
Any tips for people here about how to get that internal conversation started in their organization? If you're not the top decision maker, but you're trying to maybe drive change, how do you get that conversation going?
Well, I was part of this Leadership Development Institute, and we came up with this thought, this ideology that you do not necessarily have to be at the top in order to affect change in your organization. And it really starts by just having that conversation. You know, a lot of people feel scared or intimidated because, you know, in most arts organizations, unfortunately, we work with this top-down hierarchy, and it's just so ineffective, in my opinion, when we all start to work collaboratively and just have little conversations. And we laid out some tools that, you know, help facilitate these types of dialogues that we should be having in our organizations. And they're just sort of like icebreakers to get the conversation moving. I mean, you can't, you know, bust in the door and say, hey, I'm ready for this organization to start, you know, practicing, you know, what they say that they've been preaching. Obviously not, but there are small steps that you can take.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.